Hello, I'm Sarah Tinks Cross and welcome to my video on how to sew binding onto garments. So first of all, I want to explain why you'd want to be sewing binding onto garments. What does it do? What does it add to the garment? Well, it's a way of finishing a raw edge or finishing a cuff, neckline, any little detail that needs a nice professional finish. Binding is a really good option. I'm going to show you some examples. Here we have a blouse and this is binding that has been used around the cuff. So as you can see, it's a thin piece of fabric and it is stitched over the edge on both sides. And there's that fold over the middle. And this one, as you can see, has got a little button on it. This is the cuff of a blouse. So beautiful finish. I've got another blouse here and they've used binding here on the front neckline. Again, as you can see, it's that little strip of fabric that covers the complete edge, so you have a finish. And this one's used on the cuff, but this is a cuff opening. And so where we have a typical kind of shirt style cuff, they've just used binding here on the opening. If I show you the inside looks the same. You can also use a contrast fabric. So this is why it's really exciting to learn how to do binding, because here we have two different fabrics in the same garment, and look, they've used it as a trim. So this is a way that you can personalise garments. So not only a beautiful way to finish a cuff, a neckline, it also allows you to use a different fabric if you want to personalise. We also see it on waistbands. So one more that I want to show you here is a pair of tailored trousers. And you would have seen this in your garments at home, where on the inside of the waistband, you can see it has a little strip of pink fabric to finish off. Okay, so let's learn how to sew binding onto garments. And this is what it looks like. So you can buy it ready-made and it already has the folds ironed into it. And here I have a contrasting colour. This one's a little bit thicker, sounds crunchier. This one's a bit softer, doesn't have the crunch. Okay, so imagine this is the edge of your garment that you want to put the binding on. It's just that cut raw edge, and I've chosen a piece here that has a seam, so you know that this is the wrong side of the fabric and that's the outside. So we're starting on the wrong side. You need your binding, you'll need some scissors. If you're sewing by hand, you'll need your needle and thread, and you'll need some pins. Okay, the first thing that I'm going to do is take my binding and I want to open it up. So this is how you buy binding. You can get different thicknesses and the finished look will be just half of what it is, and then of course it's bigger again with the seams. So the pressed lines are here. When it's on the actual fabric, that is what you're going to see as the finished look. So I'm going to open it all out. That's the right side of the binding that you're going to see. That's the outside of the garment. This is the inside. I'm going to lay this right side opened. Just move that so you can just see the edge there. It's open and I'm lining it up just to cover the edge, and I'm going to put a pin in. Keep keeps it open, along there, lining the edge up just to cover the raw edge. I'm going to put a pin in. I'm going to do that all along. Okay, so there we have it. That's the outside. That's the inside. And where this little fold is, I am going to stitch. So if you're doing it by hand, you have your needle and thread. So I already have a knot. In the thread. And if we're doing it by hand, the stitch that I would use here is a back stitch. So in, out, like you would a running stitch. And then I'm going to go back on myself to join up the stitch here. And then come up the other side. Okay, so you can see here I'm going in and out. And I would do that all along. If you're using the machine, it's one straight stitch. If you're using the sewing machine, set your stitch length to 3.5 and line your foot up where the first fold is. Two little back stitches will secure. Remove the pins as you go. Okay, so this is the bit where you can see it's hand stitched, and then this is the bit on the machine. Now the next thing to do, that's what it looks on the other side. Oh, I'm glad I had a look. You need to cut any threads off. Okay, so the next bit that I'm going to do is flip this over and press it. This is still all on the wrong side of the fabric. I'm then going to turn it over and fold it in half. Now I know where half is because half is my stitch line. So I'm just going to cover that stitch line . That's what the back looks like. This is what the front looks like, but this is still loose. So the next stage is to sew this down. I like to put some pins in. Just in case it puckers. If you are sewing by hand, it is black thread, so you can't see the stitching, the same as on the machine, you'd use black thread. I'm going to continue with the pink so you can see the stitching. 2 little stitches to secure the thread. Okay, you're using your original line of stitching as your guide. Your original line of stitching, just past it. Again, the outside of this line of stitching. And just pick up that folded corner. That is all you'll see. So here I've just sewn a little stretch using black thread, and this is the stretch. So the pink here, you can actually see the stitching, so you can see what the stitch is expected to look like. And as you can see, once it's in black here, the same stitch, then it becomes invisible. Okay, let's go over to the machine and see what that looks like. And there it is, your perfect binding. This is with the black thread on the machine. The front, the back. This is in the pink thread, so you can actually see that's what the black thread looks like. And here we have black thread by hand. And that's what the black thread stitches look like, which were done in the pink. So a finished binding, 2 stages. Stitch it to the wrong side of the fabric first by hand or machine, then press over and do your final row of stitching on top by machine or hand in the same colour thread as the binding. Once on a garment, you then need to know how to join the binding. Make sure you leave enough so that you can overlap whilst you work out how much you need. So line up the edge of the binding on the wrong side, the same as we were taught earlier, and just mark in 1 centimetre from the end of your binding tape. We use tailor's chalk for this. We then overlap the adjoining side, and you also mark with the tailor's chalk in the same place so you can see that overlap. Make sure you have got 1 centimetre at least on each end. If we look here, we're now going to use the chalk to draw the whole width of the binding. Just unfolding the edges here. And then if we lay the binding on top, and again we're drawing on top of that chalk line, and what you'll see here is the other side, the chalk just goes onto the fabric, so you need to make sure you have a different colour chalk to what the colour of your binding is. I'm doing it again on the other side just to be sure. So we now have a marker on both sides of the binding in the contrast colour chalk, which is white in this occasion. Okay, I'm now trimming again, leaving 1 centimetre. So I've got enough to make a seam. And now I can join the two chalk lines together, stitch across the whole width of the binding, unfolding those edges, lining up the two ends and stitching either by hand or on the machine. This is what it looks like. And on the other side, again using the chalk lines. And now I'm just going to open so I can flatten that seam that I've made. It fits perfectly onto the edge of my garment. I've pinned it there into place. And then I'm going to stitch. Again, it's that two-stage process, stitching on the inside and then folding over the binding to then do your final row of stitching on the outside. And there we are. Step 1, shown in a contrast thread so you can see. We turn it over, ready for the second stage, which is to fold over and press, ready for you to do the line of stitching to finish it off. Make sure it's all nice and neat because this is the finished bit. Press it just like you did before, and again if you want to pop a pin in, you can. Here it is, ready for that final row of stitching. And there is your finished binding round a hem.